All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Let'sRun.com Track Talk podcast. We're slightly late this week because we wanted to wait until after Thursday's Stockholm Diamond League took place. Very interesting meet. One very fast time in the 10,000 with Rhonex Kipruto running 26:50, but overall pretty chilly and cold, windy conditions. Not too fast times in the other events. Women's 800 was 1 and 2 flat, which was slowest time since the very first women's 800 in the Diamond League back in 2010. And part of that reason was the weather. Part of that was the absence of Caster Semenya. That's right. RJ Wilson got the win in that one. First woman other than Semenya or Niensaba to get a win in the Diamond League 800 since 2015. So lots to talk about from Stockholm. A very weird men's 1500 in that race as well. But we'll also be hitting on some other topics this week, including CeCe Telfer, the transgender women's 400 meter hurdles champion in the D2 ranks. Robert wrote an article about that generated a lot of interest earlier this week. So we will be discussing that at length as well. But let's begin with Stockholm. This is Jonathan Galt. I'm joined by my co-hosts and bosses, Robert and Weldon Johnson, co-founders of Let's Run. Robert, you watched the Stockholm meet with us yesterday. What interested you the most? What's your biggest takeaway from that meet?
The weather one. I mean, it was amazing how slow the performances were in all of the events. But as someone who's opposed to having a rabbit in every Diamond League event, maybe it's not fair for me to. I am hypocritical because I complain about having rabbits, and then when the times are slow, I'm like, oh, that meet sucked. But that was my first thought. I mean, AG barely broke 201, right? I mean, what was her actual winning
2
time?
flat 0.87.
And she won by a lot. Now, part of that could be the fact that, the studs of the 800 are gone, but you started to see it in event after event, just how slow the winning times were. But then, so as the meet was going on, I tweeted out, like, look, they should postpone this men's 10,000 for 24 hours. I'm like, no one's running fast. The only good thing about that weather was it was chilly. That cold of weather, 54 degrees, would be good for the 10,000. But in the middle of the race, in the middle of the meet, I'm like, they should postpone this 24 hours. I joked about starting a petition. I then did say if I had an athlete in that event, I would not start them. And I was on record saying before the race started that Paul Chelimo, there's no way he could get the Olympic standard. I said maybe he's good enough to get the world standard in this race. But in the end, he ended up wasting his time. And to me, it was just really, I don't know. I'm fearing for the future of the 10,000 after watching that event. And but I am blown away that somebody did run 26:50 in that race. So as much as we say as the weather sucked, how in the hell did someone run 26:50? So incredible.
The interesting thing, though, Robert, you talk about postponing the race 24 hours, and I think some people will say, well, logistically, that it can't be done, or we're not sure about that. The thing is, I think if you postponed it by 24 hours, you would get just as many fans in the stands as you did for this race because everyone just poured out. This race was taking place at 10 p.m. on a Thursday night after a Diamond League. So I guess I was depressed that if you're going to, a 10,000, we talk about it not being as popular these days, and the IAF maybe wanting to kill it off it eventually. This wasn't a good sign for the event, that even if you're having it as part of a Diamond League event where the crowd looked to be pretty decent, everyone just poured out, had no interest in sticking around for this race. I think maybe if they made it a standalone event, maybe hype it up as, hey, this is a huge 10,000. This is the best 10,000 of the year outside of Worlds. Put it on a Friday night. I don't know what else is going on in that stadium. Probably not because it's over 100 years old. Probably nothing. Maybe you get more fans if you have it on Friday night. You almost certainly get better conditions. Maybe Chelimo, who ran 27:43, could have got the world standard of 27:40.
Exactly, John. I mean, when I was watching that race and there was no one in the stands, I mean, that actually happens though a lot. We see the NCAA, the fans leave. The weird, and it just blows my mind because there's no such thing as a Let'sRun.com for sprint fans. FlowTrack doesn't even do that many sprinting interviews because apparently not as many people watch them. So, but the diehard, the core of the track and field fan, like the actual, like I think full-time track and field fan, maybe a distance fan, but the casual fan is a sprint fan. So there's like a dichotomy there. So they need to have these events as just standalone things. I think maybe honestly we should take a leading role. Why don't we have the Let'sRun.com 10,000 every year, or that night of the 10,000s in Europe? Why doesn't that host some Ethiopians? Like something where people are willing to literally change it on the weather. I mean, as we said in our recap, Galen Rupp and the Nike, Alberto Salazar would never have tolerated for that. Remember when Chris Zielinski ran 26:59 at Stanford. Originally, Rupp was in that race, but originally Rupp was going to run some meet in Portland, but the pollen count didn't work, and Rupp changed. He went down to Stanford at the last minute because Alberta wanted better weather. So it's pretty interesting, sort of how, I don't know. Yet again, weather is important. We've seen that. Very, very important.
But here's the thing, Robert. I'm curious. Say Chelimo had scratched from that race and he didn't have a replacement 10K lined up. Would you honestly have said, hey, this was the right decision? Or if Kipruto went out there and ran 26:50, would you have criticized him for backing out and, for not taking on the best?
Well, if I saw a 26:50 winning time, I would have been like, well, obviously it wasn't that hard to do it. But it reminded me of when Bekele ran like 26:25 in Eugene, sort of all alone, not much rabbit help in the middle of the day or in the morning. I mean, I don't know how someone can do that. Rhonex Kipruto and Higas Gabriel looked like they were just unfazed by the weather. It was really impressive. But would I criticize him? Not if I saw all the other Americans running that slow, and I saw Julian Wanders, who's run 59:13, running 27:44. So the most disappointing thing is that these guys can't go to Worlds, yet they're like what, the fourth or fifth fastest people in the world this year. Like, that's a joke. I'm getting so frustrated with our sports. I mean, it's a good thing you guys started with Stockholm, because this CeCe Telfer story has me so riled up and so angry that the stupidity is going on. But I just see stupidity throughout the sport. Like, let's have a descending order list. They want 27. The problem with the 10,000 is, yes, they're going to a straight final now, so you have to limit it. I think you could do more than 27, but the standard has to be super, super tough. But I don't know. Like, there's just no point to have a USA's 10,000 when only one or two people is going to have the standard, and USATF goes off the standard, not the world ranking.
Right. Well, let's bring in Weldon Johnson here. You've been silently watching Robert vent for the last few minutes. Any thoughts on the Stockholm 10,000 and the qualifying procedure for Worlds? Do you think it needs to be changed, or is it okay how it is?
But John, let's give him. This is our 10,000 meter expert, folks. If you're a younger viewer and you weren't around in 2001 or 2003, Weldon finished in fourth place at the USATF Nationals in the 10,000 two times.
Yes, Meb Keflezighi was in those races. Thank you very much for the proper introduction. Fans, thank you. It's my wife's birthday. Shout out to her. My takeaway for first big pictures, one is the World's qualifying. They say they won't go off a descending order list, so essentially that means you have to run under 27:40 if you want to go to Worlds. I see no point in that, especially in an event where time is so hard to get and weather dependent and there aren't many races. So why not open it up, fill the field to 27? Like, if you're going to have a time cutoff, Paul Chelimo, Julian Wanders, in theory, should be in that race if they want to be. So that's one quick fix they could do. The other is, the weather really makes a difference in these time things, and it shows maybe in certain events. I see why the IAAF wants to go to world rankings, but a lot of the world ranking system still is based on the time you run. But in events where the weather really affects the time, i.e. long distance races, maybe there should be more emphasis on place, competing on a good thing like that. I mean, you get fifth in that race, you should be going to the Olympics. It's the best 10,000 meters in the world. So that's sort of, one, the qualifying. Okay, this qualifying system isn't perfect, but we shouldn't search for perfect. I'm shocked you guys thought a lot of people would stay around and watch in 50 degrees at 10,000 without a lot of named stars. Like, I don't know. What do you guys think? The meet wasn't full to begin with. Maybe they have it beforehand. Some people stay, but Haile Gebrselassie running, but that didn't shock me at all. I think the bigger picture with Paul Chelimo, I don't know, is he a 10,000 meter runner, right? He got dusted by about 50 seconds in that race. So there's still that question. Oh, it's not that good of a run for him. But then again, he's fifth in the race and beat some good guys, destroyed the other American guys. And compared to what he ran, 2 weeks ago in
Shanghai,
it was a much better run. Actually, it wasn't that bad of a performance. So with 4 months to go till Worlds, hey, he could get in shape. But I think some of this emphasized that USATF still has not announced how it's going to do qualifying for the Olympics and Worlds, but in the long distance events, they should not reward solely time. Look, Chelimo didn't run 27:40. The Olympic standard is 27:30. The US will have nobody. So if somebody runs the time a year out in advance, like this year, they should go to the Olympics. No. Emphasis should be put on top 3 at the trials, top 3 at the World Championships. And because, the World Championships trials this year are going to be in Des Moines. It's going to be super hot. It's highly unlikely somebody runs 27:40 there.
But Weldon, this isn't a USATF issue. USATF is not saying. I mean, their policy is we'll take the top 3 with the standard at the trials. That's their World Championship policy. But they can't send someone who doesn't have the standard. Even if they wanted to send Paul Chelimo over Shadrach Kipchirchir, which, by the way, Kipchirchir got smoked by Paul Chelimo by 36 seconds in Stockholm. But because Kipchirchir ran 35 hundredths of a second under the standard last year in May 2018, he will get to go to Worlds and Chelimo won't, which is ridiculous. He's running a race 17 months before Worlds. So it's not indicative of his current fitness at all. And he has the inside track to Worlds. But this isn't a USATF issue because even if they wanted to send Chelimo, and even if Chelimo runs the 10,000 USAs and smokes Kipchirchir, they couldn't send him because he doesn't have the standard.
Here's a question for you. Do you get a bonus for going to Worlds? Like, why would Kipchirchir even want to go to Worlds? Like, wouldn't you want to rather just...
Is that a question, Robert? It's the World Championships. Why wouldn't you want to run at the World Championships?
Well, if you're going to get smoked and finish 17th, I mean, that's what the European... Hey, John, where you're from in Europe, they don't want to send you unless you're a medal chance. So wouldn't it be better just to stay here and run Falmouth and pick up a few $1,000s or something?
You'd rather run the Falmouth Road Race than the World Championships in track and field? I don't know what to tell you, Robert.
Hey, society is saying if you can't win, there's no point in doing it.
That sounds like what you're saying, Robert.
No, it's not. And Weldon, I disagree with one thing you said about Chelimo. I don't necessarily think he ran any better than he did last week. I don't think 27:43 is any better than 13:13.
I thought it was pretty solid, to be honest. Given the conditions, given that the World Championship standard, I think for 2015 or 2017, it used to be 27:45. Like usually that would be enough to get him in. And the weather wasn't great. He didn't really have paces at his pace. Like all things considered, I don't think it was that bad. I think it showed that medaling in the 10,000 this year probably isn't going to happen if he got destroyed by Ingebrigtsen and Kipruto. But I don't think it was a bad day first Series 10K, since 2011.
My point is, what was the point of this meet, of having this race? Like, by the time I got my VPN working, and that was another thing, I was very disappointed that NBC Gold didn't show the meet. So I actually did hear back from the Diamond League, but the email didn't come through. But the guy in charge of their TV is like, look, we're putting it on the feed. It's up to the local broadcaster to see if they want to keep airing it. So you pay $75 and you didn't get to watch it in the US. So I found a VPN and was watching it from Sweden. But it's like, I don't understand it didn't look like there was any rabbiting going on. Like by the time I got on there, like 10, 11 minutes, they were all alone up front. Like, what's the point of that meet? It just, they thought the guys would get together and hit the time. Like, how do you not have rabbits? Every Diamond League meet, this is one other thing I said, like every Diamond League meet has so many rabbits and there's no rabbits for that. Well, it doesn't make any sense. And why run that in terrible, since there's no one in the crowd they're watching it, there's no prize money. Like, I guess I shouldn't be criticizing Stockholm, but there's really no reason to have, I guess a stadium could theoretically block the wind more than having it like in an open field or a college track. But it just seems like you've got to find somewhere where it's not windy.
Yeah, but all right, your rabbiting point though, Robert. Okay, rabbits. I think that definitely, if there was like a 27:40 group, that would have been very helpful for some of those guys like Wanders and Chelimo chasing the standard. And Kipruto, obviously, I'm sure he would have appreciated rabbits, but that guy's so good, he doesn't need them. I mean, he's run 26:46 on the roads. He basically soloed a 27:21 to win the World Juniors on the track last year. Like, he's just so good. He can just take it from the front. And, Gebrowet was sitting on him for the entire second half, and they just decided to pick it up the last mile and blew him away. I mean, that guy is a stud. And I guess my takeaway from that is how good do you think Kipruto is on the track? This is a guy who's run exceptionally fast on the roads. He was 6th at World Cross earlier this year. Do we view him as a gold medal threat at the World Championships? How's he going to do against the likes of Joshua Cheptegei? I mean, what do you guys think about his chances at Worlds this year?
Oh, I'm a huge fan of this guy. 26:46 on the road. But the Central Park 10K that he ran last year, what did he run there, John?
27:08, I think. Yeah, 27:08.
You know how ridiculous that is? So I was looking, at World Cross thinking this guy could do something. He ended up 6th. He's only 19. I mean, I think when you're talking the future of the event, this is the guy.
But can he close? Usually these World Championship 10,000s, even though the race is have been wanting close to 27 minutes, or is 26:49 was the waiting time at Worlds. You still need to be able to close well under 60 seconds for that last lap. And I'm not saying Rhonex Kipruto can't do it. He closed in 60 flat on Thursday, but that was in a 26:50 race. He was running the whole thing from the front. But does he have the wheels? I think that's some question. That's a question that we don't really know yet. He said he's going to try to run a Diamond League 5,000 this summer. Probably that'll give us a much better idea. But we know Cheptegei, who was second behind Mo Farah in London 2 years ago, we know he can close pretty well. He's got good track speed. I think Cheptegei, and remember, Cheptegei smoked Kipruto at World Cross earlier this year. So I think Cheptegei still has to be the favorite, but Kipruto definitely in the medal hunt for sure.
Yeah, closing in 60 point, that's not scaring anybody. I think the jury's still out on Rhonex. He's a very good runner, but to win Worlds, a lot of times it's going to come down to your kick. So what can you do at the end of a race like that? And that didn't scare anyone yesterday. It was still a very, very impressive run. And he's shown he's kind of made to run the 10K. But Cheptegei didn't watch that race and shudder at all.
All right, guys, here's the question for you. 2017 Worlds was the last time Mo won. That was a fast race. Remember, 26:49, so almost identical winning time as yesterday. Does anyone, Jonathan, amaze us with your brilliance? Please guess what Mo Farah closed in a 26:49.51 race.
I mean, I think it was pretty fast still. Wasn't it like 53 seconds?
Weldon, give me your guess, please.
54 seconds.
We have a winner, Weldon Johnson, 55.63.
That's not a winner. I mean, well, I guess he was closer than I was. He didn't get the number.
Price is right. That wasn't easy though, because he goes higher than you. He's going to be right.
Yeah, Price is Right style. 55. Okay, like same thing. That's Robert just proved it there. It's like, can you close in 55 in a sub 27 race? If you can do that, you probably can win Worlds. I don't know if Kipruto can do that. I can't wait to find out, but I think it'll be very interesting. I assume he's on the Kenyan team at this point, but you never quite know.
Never assume anything.
Yeah.
Athletics can. So let's talk about the rest of the meet. And I said at the beginning of the show, the weather.
Let me jump in here. First of all, you guys are being too negative. You need to relax. Maybe consider some CBD oils.
No, that's a good point. I woke up just before the podcast and I'm in a bad mood.
Robert needs CBD oils right now.
It's weird. We're cranky today. We apologize. We're like, what are we going to talk about? Usually we're really focused. And I don't know, the meet was a little bit, I don't know if depressing is the right word yesterday, but I saw it again today. Now my bodega, you see the sign out front, CBD oils. The pharmacy has it, CBD oils. But even my bodega. No, people, do not buy your CBD oils in a bodega. You know what I bought in a bodega one time? Batteries. And it said Energizer. And then when I looked and bought them, it had like Thai writing on the back, and they were like fakes from Thailand. And they didn't work real quickly. If you do that with your CBD oils, you're in trouble. That's why Floyd's of Leadville makes certified CBD oils for runners. And hey, I'm not sure this offer is going to be existing in June, so today may be your final day to do it. Use code RUN 2019, save 15%.
Plus, you won't test positive for some sort of contaminated supplement.
Yeah, you'll know it's legit certified CBD products for runners.
We also forgot to do at the beginning of the show. John did not say our special guest at the end of the show. A quick 15-minute interview with Sage Canaday, HOKA ONE ONE ultramarathon star. My former athlete at Cornell will be back on. He's the first two-time guest on Let'sRun.com podcast history. He is running the famous Comrades Marathon next. Is it Comrades, John?
Yes.
Comrades.
The word
Marathon.
is an English word called comrade. We use it in the English language. All right, it's not English language. It's not English origin, but come on, man.
Comrades Marathon next week. The world's richest, oldest, and most prestigious ultramarathon. And just Sage would also say most competitive. So he will be on at the end of the show. And I was wondering if Weldon was wearing his HOKA ONE ONE Carbon X shoes in the podcast. It looks like he actually, folks, this is a full confession. We can see him as we're recording these podcasts. It looks like he forgot to wear them. That's probably why he's not in this good mood. He's not as relaxed because he just ran off screen. I think he's going to get his Carbon X shoes to put them on to put him into a better mood. I'm just wondering why Hoka hasn't sent me any free shoes. We still have some pairs we have to give away. We're going to be finishing up our exploration of the ultramarathon scene next week with a big blowout. We're going to be talking about the biggest races, which is what we started the exploration with our goal of. So that will be coming next week. But Weldon, you're back. What were you doing? Were you finding your Carbon X shoes or making a birthday cake for your wife?
Oh well, I'm sorry. I don't even know what you said about Carbon X, but yeah, there's still my shoes, and we'll be giving away shoes tonight to another poster of the week that'll be coming up later in the podcast. But I saw Mike McManus, HOKA marketing manager, again this week, and I felt very cool because I was like, hey man, I got the shoes on. So Central Park, he was running, my wife was walking, she was wearing Hokas. So hey, everybody, consider wearing Hokas. They've been cool to Let's Run this month.
All right. Now that we have sorry, cut that out. Sorry, it's just gonna go back to the meat, but that was just.
No, John, we're in a bad mood. We're keeping this in.
Oh no,
everyone!
Come on, there's verbal diarrhea right here. Weldon, we gotta fix this.
The raw Let's Run is staying out. I got birthday stuff.
Yeah, that sounds like someone who doesn't want to do his editing job this afternoon. All right, well, let's go back to Stockholm. Let's start. How about women's 800? AJ Wilson.
Wait. Did I can't remember if just a few seconds ago, did I do this? Because this is my take on Stockholm. Winning times, 2 flat 0.87, 146.68, 1450.82, 335.79.
Yeah, they were slow. It was the slowest women's 800 winning time since the first Diamond League in 2010. It was tied for the slowest men's 1500 winning time ever. 146, not fast for a men's 800 winning time. That wasn't an official Diamond League event though. But yeah, let's talk some women's 800. AJ Wilson wins 2 flat 0.87. Looked pretty comfortable controlling that race from the front. It was basically what she does in the U.S. ranks, except now she's doing it against the best in the world because Caster Semenya and Francine Niyonsaba can't compete anymore in the women's 800 on the Diamond League circuit. Any takeaways from that race, Robert Weldon?
I was glad she won it. I just thought, okay, this is her chance. The big three aren't here anymore. Take advantage. And she controlled her race like I thought. Obviously, the time's a little bit disappointing, but the times across the board were. And, it's sort of interesting because we'll complain, we don't need rabbits all the time in fast times, and at slow times, we're like, oh, this sucks. The times are slow. So I'm not going to read too much in the times. She got the win. She's the favorite for Worlds, but, Worlds are 4 months from now. Afterwards, she sort of said, hey, I've done, I think, 2 real track workouts, really fast speed stuff. So she's focused down the road, but she's going to have to start learning how to control the international races like she does the U.S. races, and mission accomplished.
I mean, one, they said we're 17 weeks out from Worlds, so we shouldn't read too much into anything. But 2 things struck me. One, just as I think I was reading your preview, John, I mean, one thing that hit me was the 800 with the rabbits in the Diamond League circle, particularly, and then you have Caster Semenya in it, has been just an all-out time trial every week. And normally that's not what the 800 is. Normally there's a lot of strategy. In the championship 800, there's a lot of strategy. We're still not seeing that because there are rabbits here. But I think it's going to be really hard. I mean, she likes to run a fast pace, go to the front. And is she good enough like David Rudisha in his prime to lead these things for the full 800? I mean, yesterday she really only had to lead for the last, 350, I mean, basically the last lap. So that's my biggest concern. I mean, she did win by almost a half second. So, she did what she needed to do. It's weird. I think this is one of the first races of the day. I mean, she saw that, she did barely even celebrate it. That also struck me. Like, come on, be a little excited. I guess the time was so slow. Maybe she wasn't happy with it. But the other thing that struck me was Natoya Goal. I mean, she was former NCAA champion for Clemson, right? Was really good, was right behind. I think she beat AJ a couple of times, ran really fast last year, ran like 156, right, John?
Yeah, 156.15.
She was terrible yesterday, 203.89. That's 9th place. And she was 8th in the other Diamond League meet. So, if you're looking for someone that you think that might be with AJ up there with Caster gone, it certainly doesn't look like it's going to be her. So those were the 2 things that struck me about that race.
Yeah, and I think the one thing we just need to say, I mean, the women's 800, even though the weather was bad, these races, they're going to be slow without Semenya and Niyonsaba towing people along. That's just how it's going to be. Like 2 flat. Maybe not every race is going to be this slow, but I don't think you're going to be seeing a lot of 156s anymore, or even 157s. It might be like 158, 159 winning the thing. The other thing, the way AJ runs, you mentioned, can she do what Rudisha did? Well, I view her running more similar to late career Rudisha, the one who came back from the injuries and won the 2015 and 2016, the world and Olympic titles. He went to the front and controlled the race. He didn't go out and try to blow everyone away. He would control and then try to kick away the last 200. And I think that's more the style that Ajay has employed throughout her career. She's not always going out and blasting really hard. She gets to the front, protects that position, and just tries to hold everyone off.
Wait. Where the hell is David Rudisha? This is why I'm in a bad mood. Like, our sport's a joke. This is an all-time great. I haven't heard anything about him. We as Let's Run have failed. Like, what is this guy up to? He didn't race last year at all, right?
No, he's been injured.
But we don't get an update. Like, is he running this year? He's only 30 years old. This is an all-time great, and we don't even know. Like, imagine if I don't know, Ronaldo or some soccer player.
So we have an update from Nick Zaccardi of NBC Olympic Talk. He said this yesterday on Twitter. David Rudisha is back training, but not at competition fitness and with no return meet set yet. Rudisha missed time after his father's death in March and, quote, further injury came back a little bit, quote, per his camp. He last raced July 4th, 2017, and since battled quad problems. So there's your answer, Robert.
Wow, that wasn't even planned. That was on this. That was just spontaneous. Very good, John. John.
Thank you, Nick, true journalist. And speaking of guys who may be retired, this never came up, but it somehow entered my mind because I could keep thinking about it for the podcast. I saw Leo Manzano at the HOKA Carbon X event. He's a HOKA athlete. He was there. He didn't say anything, but he did not look like a guy who's training. I assume there's going to be some announcement soon. I think he's been injured, but sort of maybe not an all-time great, but like one of America's great 1,500 meter runners. Just, he hasn't been running well at all recently. So if he announced his retirement or stepping into a new role, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I mean, well, no, he is, I would say, one of the best Americans ever. 2012 Olympic silver medalist in the 1,500 meters. I mean, how many Americans can say that? And he went out in the heats at USA's last year. He ran a season's best of 3:41. He's 34 years old. I think a lot of people would say he's been kind of washed up the last few years, but in his prime, just tremendous kicker, NCAA champion, part of that world record DMR at Texas. I mean, the guy, he's a stud. Obviously, Centrowitz has accomplished more, but Olympic silver medal, that's very few Americans in any distance event get to that level.
All right, moving on, guys. We just talked about the David Rudisha. The men's 800 was non-diamond league meet in Stockholm. I mean, Ryan Sanchez, the young Puerto Rican, looked really good. Had a huge lead, but then just shows you how much he totally tied up and got beat at the line by Mel Tuca. I don't think we need to talk about that. What we need to talk about, and we should have led the show with this. I apologize to our Canadian listeners. They are diehards. It's probably still cold up there in Canada. They haven't been able to get outside, enjoy the spring weather. So they're listening. They're bundled up in their podcast, listening to our podcast on a weekly basis, excuse me. The Canadian national record for Gabrielle Debus Stafford. She just got married. She was Gabriella
Stafford. Now she's Gabriella Debus Stafford.
She kept the Debus in the middle. Interesting. By Diamond League standards, it was a tactical race in the sense that there were 10 women together at the bell of this race. And one of them was not Helen O'Berry. So who would have predicted that? She had fallen and didn't really get back up very well. Stafford was in on the rail in 10th place. Somehow she managed to go wide of the entire field, and with 200 to go had the lead. Coming out the final turn, still had the lead. Looked like a slight gap. Might do it, but then too much effort, too much time. But she did end up getting past and finishing 4th, but she got a national record, 14:51.59 in her first outdoor 5,000. So indoors, she smashed the Canadian record in indoors. Outdoors, she gets it as well. She's training with Laura Muir and Andy Young. I mean, she's really doing incredible. So that was, from a North American standpoint, the big story. But the win went to Agnes Tirop, former world cross country champion, 14:50.82. So those times, by Helen O'Berry type standards, aren't really that fast. But it did show that the temperature was good for distance running.
I mean, temperature, maybe. You would have liked it.
That's big in a 5,000, John.
Yeah, but I don't know. A lot of these women looked like pretty much every event they showed, including the distance events, you had at least one or two women or men on the start line just shivering. Most of the African athletes looked like they were pretty cold and didn't enjoy this meet. But yeah, the thing about Stafford, I'm going to give you some credit for this one, Robert. You said to be, the best, you need to be willing to move halfway around the world to make yourself a better runner, and that's something that Stafford has done. I believe she moved to Scotland in September and she came back to Canada for a little bit, but I think that's where she's based out of. She's working with Andy Young, who's Laura Muir's coach. And just if you're willing to give up your entire life and then join some other group because you think that's going to make you a better runner, usually that's an indicator that you've got the dedication required to become one of the best in the world. I'm not saying Stafford's necessarily going to be battling for a medal at Worlds, but I don't know. She's fourth in a Diamond League, her first outdoor 5,000 of her life. She breaks the Canadian record. That's a pretty good place to start.
John, you fell for the trap. I wanted to see if you'd talk about her and praise her, and you have. And a message board poster has called you out. You also sent out a tweet saying, what a race for Canada's Gabrielle Berdou-Stafford in Stockholm in her first ever outdoor 5,000. She had the lead with 100 to go instead of national record. And someone on the message board has basically called you a racist for doing so. I see Jonathan Gall is adopting Rojo's praising white runners who lose. I don't know what they're talking about, me praising white runners that lose.
I know. They're talking about when you started a thread about Jacob Ingebrigtsen getting like 12th at the junior race at World Cross.
Okay, but didn't we spend a huge significant portion of this podcast talking about a black runner that lost, Paul Chelimo?
Robert, lending credit, we're not racist. I mean, just acknowledging this thread, I think, is silly. Like, look, I'm giving someone, she broke the Canadian record in her first ever 5,000. I thought that was noteworthy. My Twitter followers seem to think that was noteworthy. I think Shalane Flanagan even liked it. So, so I think some of the people seem interested in that news. But if you'd rather me talk about, Fantu Worku of Ethiopia getting second in 14:51, maybe I'll start talking about that.
Well, I thought both you guys fell for the trap. I didn't realize Robert had seen the thread, but now he's explained himself away. But hey, I remember a guy named Hillary Bohr almost winning the steeplechase in Doha, and we went nuts. So it has nothing to do with race. Sure, if a white Canadian does it, it's more obvious it's standing out because you don't see it, but we're like, who the hell is this? But Hillary Bohr, a African American in the truest sense of the word, an American guy from Africa, like almost won the Doha steeple, and it was nuts. I got goosebumps. I was yelling at the TV. So thank you to both of them for sort of inspiring us, shaking up, being dreamers. And speaking of dreamers, that 800 Ryan Sanchez, like that's the same thing. An 800 guy from Puerto Rico. Sure, it's a B800, but he had the thing. I mean, I can't believe he lost it. But hey, anyone, I'm going to give anyone from a warm climate a pass yesterday. So Natoya Gould, she gets a pass, but you said she ran shitty in Shanghai too. But
well, then I have a question for you though. All right, that Ryan Sanchez race, Robert sort of skimmed over it. Robert said he tied up. To me, I don't think he tied up. I think this guy thought he had the race won, thought he could jog across the line. I know you get tired at the end of the 800, but he was slowing down and looking around. I think this guy thought he had it won and didn't run all the way through the line, and that's why he got beat by Mel Tucker and Marcin Lewandowski.
Wow, not my take at all. I just assume he's going maybe let up a little bit, but they gained so much on him. He was definitely slowing down. I think some guys don't physically show the strain, and then he sort of leaned. But unless maybe it was like an Ingebrigtsen at the Euro 15, where it looked like where he started, he was so far in front he couldn't believe it. He thought maybe he had another lap to go. So unless it was something like that, like I just don't feel like a guy winning a Diamond League, even the non-official Diamond League event's going to sort of just jog it in. Like you don't jog it in. This is like the biggest thing in the guy's life up to this point, and he's only 20 years old.
I just think he has beautiful form. I will admit, John, it did not look like he was trying at all, but he was just tying up. Like he was just done. I mean, it's like you see the guy first and like he's not trying, but then he did. He leaned right at the line. He didn't put his arms out.
He leaned at the line when he realized he was getting caught, though.
Now, in his quote, look at his post-race comments. I've never run in conditions like that. I'm totally shocked and I'm so freezing. It is totally crazy. I almost can't talk. I thought I could handle the temperature, but that was a mistake.
None of that disputes what I'm saying.
I'm suffering now a lot. I'm looking forward to my next race, and also I'll be better prepared in case I will still be in that cold. So John thinks that the guy that gave us all and tied up wasn't trying.
I don't know. I think you guys should watch the replay. You watch the replay. The first time I watched it, I thought he tied up. The second time I watched it, and Tim Hutchings agreed on the international feed. He thought he looked like he kind of started thought he could jog the race in. I would urge everyone watch that race on replay on NBC Sports Gold. Tweet at Let's Run or post on the message board. Let us know your opinion, whether you think he tied up or whether he jogged it in.
Maybe we should get Ryan Sanchez on the podcast next week.
Get to the truth of the matter. All right, how about men's 1500? Timothy Cheruiyot getting the win. This was a race that Steve Cram called the worst 1500 meter Diamond League race I think I've ever seen. And
what?
Yeah,
I thought he was talking. I heard you guys say that comment, so I don't know if I was not listening at that point or listening to the NBCSN feed or what. But I heard you guys mention that comment in the show prep. I assumed you guys were talking about the women's 1500.
No,
the women's 1500 was a non-Diamond League event. No, the men's. It was terrible. 3:35.79 winning time. Only one guy under 3:37. So it wasn't a close finish. The rabbiting, it started off embarrassing. The rabbit went out in 25-1. Like 25-1. Like that guy, he apparently rabbited an earlier race this year. Like they need to have a consultant for the rabbits. Like this is, I said, like you need to pay someone like significant amount of money. Like hire me and I'll go to Europe for $50,000 a year and take care of this. Like it should never happen. 25-1. Give me a freaking break.
Well, yeah, the funny thing is, the rabbit, Timothy Sign, he's a part of Cheruiyot and Manningoy's training group, Wrong Guy Athletics Club. This is his first year rabbiting Diamond League, and I thought he did a pretty good job in Doha, and this one he just went out way too fast. I'm sure that wasn't the plan to go out in 25-3, but he did. But then the other thing, this was even more egregious to me, was Cornelius Two-Way. He was the second rabbit, and they get to the bell. He's still at the front, but he's slowing down, and Telfer and Cheruiyot, Samuel Telfer, world indoor champion, and Cheruiyot are starting to separate towards the end of the race. And as they're going into the bell, Two-Way should have stepped off the track. Instead, he just sort of keeps running forward, but slower. And the two guys have to split him and go around him. So Cheruiyot stays on the inside and hugs the rail, but Telfer has to go out all the way out to lane 3. And it looked like he kind of lost his balance as well. The TV camera cut away for a little bit, so it wasn't entirely clear what happened. But obviously, he had to go around him. And Cheruiyot got the jump on him on the start of the final lap because he had to run around a rabbit who was sticking around the race for no reason. So I thought that was totally egregious.
Those team tactics, John. Team tactics by the rabbit. It's the next level thinking.
Well,
that was pretty bad.
Rabbit's Kenyan, Cheruiyot's Kenyan, Telfer's Ethiopian. I mean, no, I don't think so. I think it's just incompetence.
I missed what happened. I saw the stumble, so I should probably go back and watch that. I can't really comment on that. But, I mean, in whole, this race was really going to be the Manningoys versus the Ingebrigtsens. There's 2 Manningoy brothers, 3 Ingebrigtsens, but one of the Ingebrigtsens didn't show. And then I realized that, like, you know, not all the Ingebrigtsens are necessarily in great shape yet. So you've got Jacob Ingebrigtsen, who was running most of the race in like 8th place, had a big last lap though to get 3rd, 3:37.30. He was happy with that. But then you have George Manningoy. Actually, little brother beat big brother. He ran 3:43 for 8th. Then Ulrich Ingebrigtsen was 9th, and then Elijah Manningoy in 10th. 3:30.43, 3:45, and 3:48. So if I told you before the race that 3 of the 4 Ingebrigtsen Manningoy brothers wouldn't even break the equivalent of a 4-minute mile, nobody would have believed me.
It's crazy. I mean, Elijah Manningoy, he was near the front towards the start of the race. He won in Doha, the season opener in Doha. He's the reigning world champion. He ran 3:48. He ran his second 800 in 2:08. I mean, what happened to this guy? He just fell all the way back in the field. Looked like he gave up. I mean, is he hurt? What? I don't understand how he can finish 10th and run 3:48 in a Diamond League race running 3:35. It was just insane. But you mentioned Jakob Ingebrigtsen. I was pretty impressed by him, actually. It kind of reminded me, Cheruiyot showed up to the first Diamond League in Doha and wasn't at 100%, missed some training, but he sort of hung around, and then the last lap he kicked hard and he wound up getting second. And this is basically what Ingebrigtsen did. He wasn't running with the lead pack. I mean, Cheruiyot was running towards the front in Doha, so it was a little different, but Ingebrigtsen was just hanging back, and then suddenly he's just mowing people down the last 200. I thought that was a pretty good kick. He showed some determination there, and if he gets some training under his belt, you know, maybe he gets closer to Cheruiyot and might challenge for some wins this year.
John, I thought it was brilliant. I really thought compare him to some of these other guys. And you said exactly right. You compare it to Chariot from the first race. He's not in great shape. It's early in the season. He's such a young guy, but he knows what he's in. He just runs conservatively in the back and then has a big last lap, and he gets a lot out of that. Whereas these other guys go out hard and blow up, and they just wasted their time. I feel like by running that race smart, executing it, A, you gain confidence. B, you always want to finish. If you finish faster than you started, I feel like you're getting more out of the workout. Physiologically, you're not just packing it in. So I thought it was brilliant.
I thought also it was cool at the finish. Like, he puts up his hands in celebration. You know, you'll see some of these guys do this who finish second in races, and we're like, what's the deal? Is it like a cultural thing? You know, sometimes we'll see some like Kenyan guy do it. In this case, it's this Norwegian kid, and you're just like, why is he celebrating? But third place was a good run for him. He almost beat Suleiman. He almost got second. And do you guys remember how old he is?
18.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking like, oh yeah, he's 20 now. No, like you don't go from 17 to 20 in 1 year. He's now only 18 years old. This is his first race of the year. His training's not going great, and he's second in the Diamond League. As for Manangoy, I'll give him a pass. The weather. I'm getting anyone from a warm climate. Well, Kenya's not that warm in the highlands, but can be. You know, the joke is Kenyans don't like running in cold and rain. So anyone from a warm climate gets a pass. This was the Canadian meet. Aaron Brown won the 200.
Hey, Aaron Brown's the real deal, man. That guy could medal at Worlds. He's pretty good.
I didn't say he wasn't good, but yeah, he's usually not winning these things. You know, he ran better than some other guys relative to what they've been doing early this season.
A pass on all the times, and we should have realized it in the first event. I mean, they had the 400. Michael Norman runs 44.53. That's decent for most people. That's more than the second he ran in the season opener at Mount Sac. So we should have realized, and he won by a ton. So we should have realized it was going to be a slow day. But to me, another thing that stood out, if we're talking sprints, was Dean Asher-Smith. I mean, she destroyed you had the world champion, the Olympic champion. You had the entire field. That 200 was stacked, and she won by half a second. That was impressive. So she's really running well. But you talked about a celebration, Weldon, and no one's talked about this. There's no mention in our recap of Let's Run, I don't think. The 400 hurdles, Karsten Warholm wins.
This is awesome.
47.85. He wins the race. There was a woman from the meet organizers. It was kind of interesting. The person they had handing out a hat and flowers. She wasn't dressed like really scantily like you often see it sometimes in these European meets. She seemed like a professional, like business person handing out the flowers. But she tries to hand him the flowers, but she realized she shouldn't do that because he was wearing one of those spandex tops. He unzips it, puts it all the way down below his waist, and the first thing I thought was he must have an a underwear sponsor. Because he took his top off all the way to expose the top of his underwear and then flexed his muscles. That was bizarre, right?
I don't know. I just think the guy likes to celebrate. I mean, remember he had the crazy Scream celebration when he won Worlds in 2017. This one, you know, he's from Norway, so he wasn't bothered by the cold. And remember, he won his world title actually on a rainy, cold night in London at the World Championship. So he said he loved, you know, he undressed and then started screaming. I thought it was hilarious. And then his post-race interview, I looked at his flash quotes on the meet website. The first 4 words of his post-race interview were, "I am very good." And the guy's not wrong. I mean, he ran 47.85. He was the only guy under 49 seconds. Only 2 guys in the race broke 50 seconds. Now, granted, the 2 big dogs, Rai Benjamin and Abdurrahman Sambo, won in this race, but running 47.85 in the conditions in Stockholm, you'd have to think he's pretty close to the same level of those guys who, you know, Benjamin was 47.7 in Shanghai and Sambo was 47.2. So, pretty good run by Warholm. Great celebration.
See, he's Norwegian. Did well in the cold weather. Proves my point.
400 hurdles is going to be amazing this year. I mean, if the weather's like this, which it won't be in Doha, I mean, he could possibly win it. All right, so let's now talk to what we love to talk about always on Let'sRun.com podcast, the women's 400 hurdle race at the NCAA Division II Championships. And I almost don't even know where to begin on this one, but John, why don't you tell people what happened there? It's hard for me to say it. If I say something, no matter what I say, is going to be offensive to someone. So, John, factually, please describe what happened at that race.
Okay, well, the race was won by a woman named CeCe Telfer, competing for Franklin Pierce University in New Hampshire. CeCe was born male and competed for her first 3 years of college on the men's team, though we understand that she has identified as a woman since at least her freshman year. And this year, in January 2018, she decided to quit the men's team. I don't think she was enjoying the sport. She wasn't really showing up to practice that much. Didn't sound like she was very dedicated from the interview that you did with her coach. But and then in the fall of 2018, the start of the 2018-19 track season, she decided to come back out for the team, but for the women's team this time. And she spent the entire 2018-19 season competing as a woman, and she won the NCAA title in the 400 hurdles this past weekend down in Texas. And the reason why we're talking about this is because as a man, competing in the men's division, she wasn't really that great. She wasn't close to qualifying for nationals, really. And then she comes out and really dominated the women's championships and wins the national title in the 400-meter hurdles. And I think the issue we have with this, it's not that anyone choosing to identify as a woman, that's not a problem. It's not an issue of like being against transgender rights or anything like that. I think we all support CeCe's choice to identify as a woman and to be, I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. The problem here is that we don't really know. There are two things. I think one is the natural genetic biological advantages that someone born a male might have versus someone born with a female. And the other problem is that we don't really know what the NCAA policy is on this subject. So the NCAA does have a transgender handbook. In that handbook, they say that for someone completing a male to female transition, such as CeCe, they have to undergo 1 calendar year of testosterone suppression treatment. But it doesn't say, that's all we know about it. It doesn't say how that treatment has to be administered, if it's going to be checked by the NCAA or a different authority, if there's a certain level that she needs to bring her testosterone levels below. None of that is clear. Robert has reached out to the NCAA for clarification on this issue. They've essentially stonewalled him. They won't give him any information on it. And so I think that's why people are frustrated, because we don't know. The rule on this is just maddeningly vague. We don't really know what the situation is. And I think to a lot of people, it looks unfair that someone born as a man and who competed in the men's division for the last 3 years can just come in and win a women's national title.
Very good summary, John. I mean, I think it's very simple, folks. Mediocre as a man, national champion as a woman. Now, I'm very happy for CeCe personally that she's really thriving as a woman. She no longer has to be referred to as a man when she does men's track, and that's why she quit the team. She didn't like that. That was the only part of her life where she was referred to as a man. And she's showing up at practice. She was a model athlete, according to the coach. She lifted weights, whereas before she was only showing up at practice 1 or 2 days a week. But the reality is she's running slower now than she did as a man, and now she's a national champion simply from changing her gender. And I guess you could say she's having a higher work ethic. But the NCAA will not confirm what Joanna Harper, I reached out to Joanna Harper, who has made the transition successfully from male to female. And Joanna has told me that that their NCAA has not set its maximum T level for trans women, and I don't believe they do any independent verification of hormone levels. So it sounds like as long as you have a doctor's note saying you're producing your levels to some degree, you can compete, which is a joke. Even the coach said it was very vague, and a lot of the impetus was on them and the university. So to me, this is crazy. But there's a few things that I have a real problem with. I mean, the idea that men have been taking so much from women over these years, now they're going to take the sports away, it's just crazy to me. But there's a few things that really bother me. One, John, I let you introduce it because no matter what I do, people criticize. I didn't mention that she was born a man. I said she competed the first 3 years and was raised as Craig Telfer because I was trying to not say she was born as a man because I thought that might be offensive to her. I thought she may view I was born a woman, but people just didn't recognize that fact. But people said, no, it's actually disrespectful to mention her male name. It's like considered sexual harassment. So I lose there. But now I'm on Let's Run, and people were saying, look at the photo you used. It's not feminine enough. And I'm like, what are you talking about? They're mad that I used a photo that was it's the photo that the NCAA tweeted out of her on the victory stand. And I want to read what I just wrote on the message board. Amazing. I used a photo that the NCAA tweeted out after she won. And you're mad that I'm not going out of my way to find that makes her look more feminine? First of all, have you ever thought that she doesn't look more feminine because she was born a man and she's 6 feet 2 inches tall? But the fact that you want me to go out of my way to make her look more feminine is like proof that this is all insanity. Look feminine? Are you kidding? That's actually a stereotype that feminists have been fighting against for decades. The Caster Semenya supporters, even the Serena Williams fans, have been saying for years that they are criticized, that these athletes are criticized for being too masculine, and yet you want me to make her look more feminine. For years, sexist men thought women shouldn't do certain sports, and they shouldn't look too masculine, and feminists rightly stood up against that. Yet in this case, you want me to purposely try to make her look more feminine. Well, that's the exact opposite of what feminists have been fighting for the last 50 years. I don't care how someone looks. I care about whether they have an unfair biological advantage. The idea that a female runner like yourself can't acknowledge this, that a man has a huge biological advantage, is almost beyond me. The reality is CeCe is running slower now than she did as a man, and yet she's the national champion. So that's point number one. I mean, it's just really upsetting. I mean, it's just, I don't understand how people can not understand that. The other thing that bothers me is everyone's being disingenuous here. When Franklin Pierce, when she wins this race, she's put up on their website, she's celebrated as a national champion. But no one's saying that she's the first transgender athlete to win. They ignore the fact that she was on the men's team for 3 years. They ignore the obvious biological advantage that she has. And yet, in a few months, apparently, the NCAA has been sent out a feature writer, and they're going to be featuring her in some NCAA Quarterly as this sort of modern-day Jackie Robinson or Rosa Parks or something. So you can't have it both ways. If you're going to, if you want to present her as this great heroine and this great accomplishment, well, then why are you hiding it in all your press releases?
Yeah, I think people are way too sensitive. I mean, it's a sensitive topic. And then when you combine it now with the intersex thing that's going on, it's pretty crazy. But now you're supposed to pick certain photos that make her more feminine. I mean, that's sort of crazy. And then she's suppressing her testosterone to compete, which is considered okay. But in the case of Caster Semenya, which is a different thing because she's intersex, people are saying it's cruel to make her take testosterone. It just sort of shows that this, I don't know, this thing that we thought was black and white and binary sex isn't. And the intersex thing is different, but then transgender is completely different because biologically, she is male, right? Or is male, was born male. And the only way to get rid of that is to suppress her testosterone. So the only way for her not to have an unfair biological advantage is to suppress her testosterone. Then others take it farther and say, hey, even once she suppresses her testosterone, she's going to have bone density, some other stuff that still gives her an unfair advantage. And I'm all up for letting people discuss that, say what they want about it. But some people just want to, shout you down and say you're a bigot, you're a racist or whatever, if they disagree with your opinion, which is sad and unfortunate. But what she went through and what she's done, it can't be easy, right? I mean, I applaud her. It sounds like she's in a much better place mentally this year and a better athlete, a better student. So that part is good. Just the question is, should she have the right without firm guidelines in place to win NCAA titles? My personal opinion is no.
Right. And I wish the NCAA would just directly answer my questions, which they don't do. They're like everyone's like trying to hide around the bush and then yet at the same time celebrate her. And yeah, it's I'm great that she's found her true self and is happy. That's fantastic. If I was coaching her, I think I would say, this is great, CeCe, for you. Let's work hard. Let's do this. But I would try to get her to say, I don't think this is fair. Like, let's don't do the championship meets. But hey, nowadays people are afraid to say anything that someone doesn't agree with. To me, it's really simple. I think that we could go down to almost like, well, I don't know if I want to say it. Like my friend who was very liberal and Hillary used to work for Hillary, she's an athlete though. It was like, I think it's women's bodies. If we would acknowledge the fact that the people that have the potential to potentially give birth to a baby are not going to be as good at the elite level sports as men. And do you have this potential? I'm not saying infertile people shouldn't be allowed to compete in women's sports, but do you have this potential? Then that's how you classify the women. And that would not include Caster Semenya. She has internal testicles. If anything, maybe she could father a baby. She could never give birth to a baby. Same thing here with CeCe. I mean, maybe it's not that simple, but
it's not that simple, Robert, because the difference between the categories, the reason we have men's and women's categories isn't because men can father children and because women can give birth to children. That's not the reason for the dividing line. The reason is because of testosterone and because of the differences in muscle mass and blood and all that stuff that testosterone provides that gives men advantages.
All I'm saying is that originates from the women's unique ability that should be celebrated to give birth.
I think that
It's an
doesn't.
amazing thing.
I think you're sort of conflating things there. I
Okay,
just think it's
let's just
not
move on.
total. There's not going to be a simple, easy
No.
dividing line. I think that's.
But why hide with NCAA? Why won't the NCAA be honest about what they're doing? Anyways, and one other thing we haven't even talked about is it may soon be illegal, to force people to take any testosterone thing. But I want to conclude with this. There was a post on the bottom of a Washington Post editorial by Martina Navratilova, Sonia Richards-Ross, and Dorian Coleman-Lambert. Great editorial saying how we need to protect women's sports. I suggest you Google it, Washington Post. You'll find it. And one of the comments there, and I'll read some excerpts. I've slightly edited it. I love this. I think eventually we'll realize that treating transgender ideology like other race, sex, or sexuality-based civil rights movements is a mistake. It's more akin to a religion based on emotional appeal. What I mean is the issue should be protecting people's rights to believe whatever they wish, as we do with religion, but resisting this push that everyone else must change their understanding of reality. Right now, the push is for everyone to view someone else's personal belief of their gender identity above biological reality, even in situations where it hurts women, and it almost never hurts men. Mutual respect and freedom of conscience are important. I support the right for people to believe whatever they wish, like with religion, and I don't actively try to interfere in religious practice or respect people's decisions. But gaslighting people by saying their eyes deceive them, or trying to force regressive debunk concepts like the Victorian nation of sexed brains and calling it science should stop. I think it was an excellent comment, and maybe one we should just conclude on.
Okay, I think we're done with CeCe. Can we move it on? Real quickly, thread of the week. I think we'll end there. We won't have deleted thread of the week, but I was looking at the top threads, and this one came on hot. I mean, this was hot while the Diamond League meet was going on yesterday. Ryan Hall, 25:58 5K.
Wow. So now he's run a 5-hour marathon a couple of years ago, and now he's run a 25:58 5K. But he can probably lift more weights than all of us combined.
Yes. If you look in the Let'sRun.com YouTube channel, I did an interview with Ryan at the Boston Marathon about how to get bulked up. Maybe this summer, that'll be my goal, to follow that. So that thread in one day is the top thread of the week, but it wasn't started by a registered user. So how can we give that guy Carbon X shoes? So then I went on down, and post number 2 for the most popular thread of the last week, the hikers who died on Everest and what it says about the Instagram era. And this one was started by I don't know if they want to call him a troll, one of the most popular or controversial, or I don't know what you want to call him, Let's Run posters, Jamin. So I was like, wow, can we give, there's some discretion here in who we give the prize to. So it'd be kind of controversial to give Jamin the prize. I like Jamin, but some people are like, oh, he posts too much, whatever. Then I went down, the next one, Lost Hawaii Hiker found after 2 weeks. That one was by an unregistered poster. Post number 4, Donovan Brazier has become skinny after joining NLP. I click on that one, started by Jamin as well. So 2 of the top 4 threads started by the same guy. I think that's it for sure. Jamin, winner of a HOKA Carbon X shoes. If you guys want to win some shoes, start some threads under a registered name. But, they're both interesting topics to discuss. People are really fascinated by this, the log jam on the top of Everest. And there's a couple threads on that. And, what does it say about us? I haven't read the Brazier thread yet, but people seem obsessed. People think we're only obsessed about female body types. People are very obsessed about male body types, what the runners look like, their weight, that sort of stuff. So both those are pretty interesting threads.
Yeah, the picture of the hikers on Everest is just a phenomenal image. Just the line, it's like a line at Disneyland to go on a roller coaster, and this is to summit the highest peak in the world. It's just phenomenal. Donovan Brazier, I don't know, he didn't strike me as being particularly different from how he looked last season when I watched him race in Doha. Maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention, but still ran pretty well. So I don't really have anything to say on his body type.
Yeah, I haven't read the thread yet, so I need to clearly. But hey, I think that'll be it for this week. Next week, we got the NCAA Track and Field Championships from Austin, Texas. Rojo will be there. Rojo's got something to say, it looks like.
Oh, don't forget, folks, we'll be concluding this podcast with an interview with my former athlete, Sage Canaday, who will talk about his chances of being the second American man to win the Comrades Marathon. An American man has not won Comrades in 25 years, dating to 1994, and Alberto Salazar won it. So he'll talk about, can he pull off the huge upset? If he does, he'll be getting a black page on Let's Run for a full week.
Wow.
So
During NCAA week. Wow. Oh, no, it's after NCAAs.
it's after NCAA.
Oh, sorry.
So we'll be back early next week, Monday or Tuesday, to have a podcast to preview NCAAs.
Camille Herron, Let's Run visitor, did win Comrades, and I don't know, we didn't give that what it was due.
And she's running this year as well, so should be exciting.
Oh, I didn't even know that. See, if we give a proper preview to one of these races, that's what will show the ultras have arrived. But I think Robert, secretly, he's promoting Sage behind the scenes. We haven't, he sort of did this on his own, the Sage interview. But he's never probably going to have coached a Boston Marathon champion. But if Sage somehow could pull this off, I assume it's really highly unlikely, Robert will just like bask and be like, yeah, I set this up. I'm responsible. But also, hey, Running Warehouse, we're going to have a prediction contest next week for NCAAs. You want to enter that. But till next week, Sage Canaday interview next. Thanks, guys.
Sage, thanks for joining us. You helped us kick off our month plus exploration of the ultra marathon scene, sponsored by HOKA ONE ONE. Thus, it's only fitting that you help us wind it down. But to be honest, the real reason why we're having you on this week's podcast is we're just over a week out from Comrades, and this is the one ultra marathon that Weldon and I have always known about, because we can remember Alberto Salazar winning it way back when we were in college in 1994. So you're running this year's race. We wanted to touch base with you again to see how the training's been going, how everything's going. But welcome back to the podcast, Sage. I hope you realize what a great honor this is. The first person to be a guest 2 times on the Let'sRun.com podcast.
Oh, wow. Thanks. No, it's an honor, and excited to talk ultras on Let's Run here. So thanks for having me.
So, we're what, 8 or 9 days out? Is the race on Saturday or Sunday?
I believe it's on Sunday, but of course it's in South Africa, so it's half a day ahead almost of U.S. time. 9 days out about.
Hopefully you figure out whether it's Saturday or Sunday. I don't want you showing up at the start line a day early, but how are you feeling heading into the race? I mean, I know 9 weeks ago you ran the Rotterdam Marathon. You ran 2:23 there, but you've had 9 weeks to get fitter since then. How's the training been going? So how are you feeling heading into what we call the world's oldest, largest, and richest ultramarathon?
I also say it's the most competitive, hands down, ultramarathon in the world. I feel good. Rotterdam was a disappointment, but basically I knew after Rotterdam I was going to be running Comrades, and it's kind of a build-up for Comrades. I was like, okay, this was a good long training run. I'm going to do some more 26-mile training runs in training, but a lot slower. Like I did one out here in Boulder on the hills that, just ran like a 2:36 marathon, 6-minute pace. And then I paced at Carbon X, HOKA ONE ONE Project Carbon X, 4 weeks ago. I paced 36 miles. My teammate Pat Reagan there was running the 100K, so I paced him at about 6:05 mile pace for 36 miles. And that was a good training run too for Comrades. I always had, Comrades in the back of my mind. So putting in some good long runs, the mileage, I've got a lot of 110, 120 mile weeks. Nothing too crazy, but I could really only compare my fitness to when I last did Comrades, which was in 2015, which was an up year. And that year I actually ran 2:19 at Boston, got 16th place at Boston, but it was only 5 weeks before Comrades. And I'm starting to think that I couldn't recover in 5 weeks. Whereas hopefully I'm hoping 9 weeks between a marathon and Comrades is going to help me more. And I know what to expect this year too, because I've done the course, and it's brutal.
So you talked about running some stuff at like 36 miles at 6:05 pace. Wow. So heading into the race, do you have a pace goal that you're going to shoot for? It's a 55-mile race, or are you just going to run with the leaders? How are you going to approach the race strategically?
A little bit of both. With the time goals, you got to react to tactics. It's more about place than time. But, statistically, I know on most uphill years at Comrades, again, it's a net uphill race, To be in contention for top 3 or be in contention for the win, you definitely have to run under 5:40, 5 hours and 40 minutes. It's about 55 miles, maybe a little under 55 miles exactly. So that works out to being 6:11 mile pace average. Again, though, keep in mind there's 6,000 feet of climbing during the race, because it's a hilly race and it could be quite hot. So, if it's really hot, maybe you go out a bit more cautious, but generally you're keying off the favorites, and a lot of the tough, a lot of guys are really tough. So there'll be a pack of like 30 guys rolling through the first half in around 250, which is pretty much right on 540 pace. The second half doesn't have as much climbing, but there's a lot of attrition in the second half. So, you're keying off that main contender pack. If you want to be top 3, top 5, you definitely need to run way under 6 hours. So I kind of keep the mile splits with that in mind. We'll roll through the first marathon probably. I think last time we rolled through in about 2:42 for the first marathon, and there was probably about 4,000 feet of climbing in that. So it was a big uphill marathon, and then you're not even at the halfway point. So, I'll look at my splits, but it's mainly going by heart rate and mainly by keying off the other guys and just seeing how you feel during the race.
So you wear a heart rate monitor. What would your heart rate be at for a race like this?
I'm not a diehard heart rate person because sometimes the heart rate monitor screws up. I have like a Garmin 935, so it's a wrist strap heart rate monitor. I monitor it relatively a little bit. Like early on, there's some really big hills, and if you hit a heart rate spike over, the intensity that you'd run a single marathon at, it's probably too hard. So for me, that's like in the high 80% type of range, 88, 80, 90%. That's getting close to marathon pace, which is really close to my lactate threshold, which I know I can't sustain for more than, basically an hour, 2 hours. So, that would be kind of like a suicide intensity. So, I might glance at it, but I also kind of just know by how hard I'm breathing. You obviously do not want to get any anaerobic contribution going on, and you're mainly worried about sheer muscle fatigue in your legs, having a muscle cramp, but you're also worried about burning through your glycogen too fast. So I need to keep it more in the maybe 80% of maximum heart rate type of intensity, but it's kind of a crapshoot if you could sustain that for 5.5 or 6 hours. It's going to hurt a lot, basically.
So, but back to the training question, never trained or even run an ultra, I wasn't really, I guess coming into this interview, I was like, I don't know how I would know if I was ready to go. I mean, when I was doing a marathon, I always try to do a 30K at race pace. So basically run 75% of the distance at race pace. And I imagine you can't really do that for an ultra. I mean, that would be over 40 miles in this race. I mean, you did do 36 miles. So how do most ultra runners sort of know that they're ready to go, or how do you personally know you're ready to go? I mean, you did the Carbon X thing, so maybe did that work out perfectly for your training, or what would you normally do if you didn't have to do that to know, hey, do you have like a signature workout that you like to do to know you're ready to go for a 55-mile race?
Honestly, it's more fickle, and I haven't done, I've only done Comrades once. It's my only road ultra that I've actually done, and most of the ultras I do are really like mountainous trail ultras, so you totally throw pace out the window. But I mean, you definitely need some long runs in training, and you definitely want to average high mileage weeks. So you're, averaging over 100 miles a week for hopefully months at a time. You're putting in long runs that, they're not going to be even close to 75 or 80% of the distance of the ultra, because that would beat you up too much. Although I have heard some of the South African guys, Bamusa Matumbo, who's one of the favorites to win, I heard he does a couple 50K to 70K long runs in training. So that would be, what's 70K? 50K is 31 miles. I think he does some like 40-mile long runs, basically.
Yeah, 70K is over 40 miles.
But then someone like Camille Herron, who won last up year, American Camille Herron, she says she doesn't do anything longer than like 22-mile long runs in training at a single time. But I know she averages well over 100 miles a week. And what some ultra runners do is they do back-to-back long runs on a weekend. So say Camille does a 22-miler on Saturday, then the next day she does a hard 18-miler. So you're doing like back-to-back hard long runs, and you put in a big weekend where you did, 30 or 40 miles. But Especially for the longer ultras, you're not going to run the full distance in training. So it's more of a crapshoot. And if you do the long runs, like I did some 22-mile long runs, 26-mile long runs. I do them at a faster pace. So I say, okay, I did this marathon in training at 6 flat pace. My goal race pace for Comrades is 6:15 mile pace. So, hopefully when I taper, I could hold that for the longer distance. But, Carbon X worked out really well. It was a great event. It made it easy for me because we had aid station support and the miles just flew by. If I was training by myself, though, I definitely would have done a hillier route because Comrade's all about the paved hills. So Carbon X was a pretty relatively flat course, at least compared to Comrades. But it was good, I think.
So, 13th 4 years ago. What's the goal this year? Actually, when I was coaching, I don't know if I ever made you do it, but I made a lot of guys do it. I had to say, come up with an A goal, a B goal, and a C goal. So let's do that. Sort of something you'd be satisfied with, something that is aspirational, and then the dream.
Yeah. So I still do that too. The ABC goals. I learned that from you, Rojo. So yeah, the first goal, I guess the C goal, is just to improve. So, logically, significantly under, I ran like 6:02 last time. It was a pretty bad meltdown in the last 20 miles. So I'd like to be under 6 hours, at least significantly under 6 hours, and be top 10. Cause like I said, I was 13th. I was really 15th, but there were 2 guys that tripped drug tests on the day, positives, in the top 10 that year. So, top 10 under 6 hours would be great, as a C goal. B goal, I'd say, would be to be top 5. I'd be really, really happy if I was top 5. It's such a competitive race. There's so many really great South African runners, especially. They do the race every year. They peak for it every year. They know the course really well. So it's competitive. There's a lot of prize money. You're starting to make more prize money when you get top 5 as well. So that's a big incentive. And sub 5:45 on the time goal there kind of corresponds to about top 5 if you run in the low 5:40s. Then, the pie in the sky goal, ultimate A goal would be to try to win. I'm trying to say how realistic that is for me at this point. It's extremely hard to win. It would be great. Maybe I should just say top 3. That would be a huge honor. So yeah, top 3, sub 5:40 A goal, but be in contention to win. You kind of have to make a choice during the race. Do I want to try to be top 3 and win? Or do I just want to be top 10? And if there's a break in the last 20 miles, you could risk it all, like I did in 2015 with Max King. I risked it all. And I said, okay, I want to try to win. And I totally imploded the last 20 miles. So I might be more conservative this year.
If there was a betting house putting odds of a win, how big would your odds be?
I would not be betting on me for the win. I would bet on Mutombo to win, probably.
100 to 1.
Oh no, I'd say the odds are better. I mean, it's not like running a marathon major. Like, I'd say, there's a 0% chance of me winning Boston or New York. Like, there's probably a 0% chance of me getting top 5 at Boston or New York. Whereas I'd be like, I could be top 10 maybe, I could be top 10 at Boston, maybe on like a bad weather year. Like, I was 16th at Boston one year, but, it's not as deep as a marathon major for sure. So there's a chance I could win, but it's still very unlikely. I'm more likely probably to win like a trail ultra, much more likely to win UTMB or something like that.
And you talked about sort of the South Africans being the biggest threats to the win. I mean, they've won 7 years in a row. You talked about Mutombo's won up and down, repeat winner the last 2 years. I mean, do you know who all the key players are? Like, my brother was asking, like, hey, if we write a preview of this race next week, is there a list of elites that are in the race? Like, you can break it down like a World Marathon Major, or is it kind of happenstance to figure that out?
Honestly, I haven't researched all the favorites. Most of them, you're correct, are South African, at least on the men's side. Obviously, on the women's side, we have Camille Herron, who won the last up year. But yeah, Bamusa, he won the last up year. He won last year in the down year. I believe he won 2 Oceans ultramarathon a couple months ago as well. Definitely a favorite. There's some lists, I think, and if you look in some of the South African blogs, they do a big, there's a lot of press conferences leading into the race where they bring up all the favorites, and, the list is quite long. And yeah, I think with South Africa that, these guys do it every year for the last 5 or 10 years. they're super experienced on the course, and they train all year just for this race. So it's a really big deal down there. And, these guys are good. A lot of them haven't run maybe to their full potential in a marathon, but a lot have run maybe like 2:15 or so. And so they have plenty of speed to win Comrades, I'd say.
And what about the logistics? When do you leave? I mean, it's a long way away. And what type of fueling do you do during a 55-mile race?
Yeah, so I'm going to leave this weekend. It was kind of with the plane ticket prices. Ideally, I probably should be leaving a little earlier, but I'm flying through Europe on the way there. So I'm going to actually take a day and try to reset and get a lot of sleep, and then do the 10-hour flight from Frankfurt to Johannesburg the next day. So it's going to be like a 2 or 3 day travel day. I'm leaving this Sunday. I'll get there basically Wednesday after spending the night in Europe. So, try to adjust to the jet lag as quickly as possible, try to survive the journey. And gosh, what was the question again?
Fueling during the race. Like, do they have water stations? Do you need an aid? Do your parents go out to help hand out bottles? How does this work?
So it's really great. There's basically an aid station every 2 miles. I carry my own, like basically a fanny pack, Nathan belt, we'll call it, full of gels, my own gels. So the Spring Energy Canterbury, which are 100 calories a pack. So I'll maybe have like 6 or 7 gels in my fanny pack that I'll be taking like one every 45 minutes. And then I'm also going to have, being part of an elite team, you actually get custom fluid bottles, or your own fluid bottles that get handed to you at some of the aid stations. So I think we have 8 fluid handoffs that I could fill with electrolyte fluid, which also has carbs and calories and sugar in it. So I'm looking at getting in over 300 calories an hour of mostly carbohydrate. And then the regular aid stations for the masses and for us as well, they have these bags full of water, basically. They're like little plastic tubes full of water, and you bite into it and you could drink water. They have electrolyte fluid. Some of the aid stations have like Coca-Cola and potatoes. And then they have like maybe like sports gummy chews and candy. And then it's like a major marathon though. They're really well stocked aid stations. As an elite though, you don't want to be slowing down too much, so you're running through pretty fast, 6-minute mile pace through the aid stations. But the thing that really impressed me with Comrades is these guys in the lead pack will help hand out water to their competitors. So we're running up to an aid station, big pack of 30 guys, and the guys on the inside who are close to the aid station will start grabbing these flasks of water, and they'll hand them over to their competitors off to the side. So everyone's helping everyone make sure they get the hydration they need. If you want something and you can't reach it at the aid station, your competitor will hand it to you. And a lot of these guys are coming out of poverty. They're competing for $38,000 for the win. And they were really generous. Another example of that is my bib was coming undone on the back of my jersey while I was running. And this competitor he's like, hey, your bib's coming undone. He pinned it for me back onto my jersey because he didn't want it to fall off.
Well, that's cool. And I think there's also like a huge like $25,000 bonus for the first South African. So
yeah, there's time bonus, or there's a course record bonus. There's sometimes inter club bonuses for a lot of the native South Africans. And then, full disclosure, like I would also get a bonus if I placed really well too. So it's more than just that open prize money on the line.
Last question. I promised Weldon to keep the interview under 15 minutes, and it's already over that. So if you do win, let's say your dreams become reality, Sage, you'll be only the second American man to win it. And the other man was Oregon's own, you're a fellow Oregonian, Alberto Salazar. Given your strong anti-doping stances, Sage, how would it feel to be on a list with Alberto Salazar as an American champion of Comrades?
I'd be hugely honored to win Comrades. And yeah, to be on the list with a guy that ran, 2:08 in the marathon, would be pretty extreme. It'd be a huge honor. It'd be a dream come true for sure. Realistically, it's probably not going to happen. So I don't think I have to worry about it too much, but it's the ultimate dream.
Well, good. That's what keeps us and motivates us to train. So good luck, Sage. Thanks for joining us. And if you do really well, you could be a 3-time guest on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. That'd be an honor. Thanks for having me on.